Welcome to FPCI Indonesia's Economic and Political Review. The Chinese zodiac for year 2020 is the year of the rat. But if I have a choice, I would change it into the year of a black swan instead, because everything that happens every century happens this year. And there is no country or industry that is spared by COVID-19. Although there are a few signs that some countries are able to flatten the curve, unfortunately, Indonesia is not one of them. We still have about 400 to 500 new COVID patients every day. And we still have so much uncertainty, and it's only May of 2020. We still have about 7 months to go. To help us with understanding what might happen and also what might not happen, we have today Ibu Masita Kristalin dari MOF, Pak Andri Asmoro, Chief Economist of Bank Mandiri, Pak Yongki Susilo, Board of Expert of Indonesia's Shopping Center Tenant Association, Pak Bambang Harimurti, Commissioner of Tempo, and Pak Rolf van Dorm, Senior Economist for World Bank. Welcome all. Let's have this discussion started. Let's start with Ibu Masita to present her presentation.
Thank you, Pak Doni. Thank you for the time and thank you for having me today. I would like to start my presentation. I think each of us has 10 minutes, so I'll try to be brief. I believe here there's a lot of macroeconomists on the panel, so I will just go very quickly on the first part of my presentation, which is the impact on the economy. Have I shared my screen? Not yet, yeah?
Belum, Bu. Belum kelihatan. Now we can see.
Okay, all right. So basically, if we remember what happened to the economy last year, yeah, so the discussion was merely about oil and then, you know, the trade truce between US and China. And around the end of the year until mid-February, if you remember, there's actually a quite strong inflow into emerging market. So even though COVID-19 first incidents happened before the Chinese New Year, especially in December 2019, but up until February, I guess the global investors still very optimistic about the outlook of the world. Nobody would guess that this will be the next pandemic after the Spanish flu. Many things happen actually within a month. Yeah, if you're looking at the economic indicators for January and February, Indonesia economy would probably still growing around 4% if you look only until February numbers. But then within a month, all the numbers went south, and it went south very, very fast. If you look at the consumption number, Indonesia is usually above 5%. Now we're at 2.7%. Investment went down pretty significantly, less than 2%. Government expenditure, we try to fast forward, but many of the government non-priority spending, of course, cannot be disbursed because of the situation. And on the external balance side, at least we got help from less import. So overall number is not bad. In fact, in several months, it's recorded a surplus still. But we know that there's a disruption in the global value chain, which will affect production. If you look at production in the first quarter, it affects not only tourism and the food industries like restaurant, but already affect manufacturing, trade, transportation, even agriculture, which we think first that will not be very, very affected by the current pandemic. So before the COVID happened, yeah, Indonesia is actually in the middle of reform. As you remember, the government is trying to work very hard to be able to escape the middle income trap by 2045, yeah, the 100 years of Indonesia independence. To be able to grow above the potential growth, we estimated potential growth for Indonesia is around 5%. So you have to grow at around 5.5 to 6% in order to escape the middle income trap, which is why the government target was always above 5%, 5.3% for this year, actually, what we made last year. But because of the situation, we think that growth this year, many organizations, of course, have different assumption of growth. We have estimated that growth will be around zero, negative 0.4% to 2.3% this year, yeah, overall number. What happened to poverty and unemployment if we reach the very severe scenario? So with the very severe scenario, unemployment will increase by more than 5 million people this year, and poverty by almost 4 million people this year. Of course, this is before the stimulus, the calculating stimulus that the government is currently doing. So if we remember the last two crises that we had, yeah, the 97 crisis, the Asian financial crisis, and also the 2008 crisis, many people have discussed this, but I just would like to point out one thing. In the previous two crises, Indonesia non-formal economy and the small medium enterprise is actually playing the role as shock absorber to the economy, because the crisis was starting in the financial sector. Hence, sectors that are affected directly are sectors that has high link to financial sector. And this non-formal and small medium enterprise are not really linked to the financial sector. So it was a blessing in disguise, people said, for Indonesia. The stark differences with the pandemic that we are currently facing, the SME and the non-formal is the first that get hit by the crisis because of the physical distancing, because of the nature of the pandemic. So
Ibu
the one
Masita,
thing,
boleh make it your presentation full screen, Bu? Banyak yang nggak bisa ngelihat. Thank you.
Sorry, is it full screen now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Pak Doni. So, which is why the current government stimulus are actually focusing on three major things, yeah, according to the arahan Presiden, yeah. The first, of course, because this is a pandemic, the first priority is health policies to contain the current crisis, the pandemic. Second is social safety net. Why? Because of the physical distancing and the hit to the non-formal sector, the consumption will get hit very fast. Third is the support to industry or support to the private sector, especially the small and medium enterprise, because the small and medium enterprise is the one that get hit very significant in the current crisis. So basically, the stimulus for the economy focus on these three things that I just mentioned: stabilizing consumption, maintaining investment flow, not to increase the investment. Of course, we know that output will go down, but more into supporting the business so that we can minimize unemployment or massive layoff. And then third is the trade activities. We also know that, because of the closed border and stuff, trade activities will be very difficult to do, but we're trying to focus on the main goods, main goods and services by giving tax incentive, custom and excise incentive, relaxing several restrictions to export and import goods, streamlining administration process, and improving and accelerating our current reform on national logistic system. So the first thing that we're doing for the micro, small, medium enterprise is the interest rate subsidy. So this will affect around 61 million accounts, including the really micro, before micro, and then medium enterprise with subsidy. So this is above the line. So this is government expenditure. And second, we do fund placement by the government into the micro, small, medium enterprise loan restructuring. So to help the restructuring process and to add working capital to SME, we also do fund placement in banks to help, because company not only need the government help to waive the current payment for loans, but also they need additional working capital to be able to stay afloat, right, and not to have massive layoff. We also help in terms of giving more working capital to small medium enterprise. We also help additional guarantee through Jamkrindo and Askrindo. For the SOE, of course, the government can do the guarantee directly, but for the non-SOE, the government has to get third parties such as Jamkrindo and Askrindo to help with the guaranteeing. So why we need to guarantee? Because the current situation, it's really hard for banking and financial sector to give loans, right? Because of the low demand and low economy. That's why we need additional guarantee so that banks and financial systems can, have more guts or, less risk in order to give additional working capital to affected sectors. We also have tax incentives. These are discussed already since the stimulus stage 1 and stimulus stage 2. Now we're in stage 3. The total amount reached 123 trillion for not just SME, but also for several export-oriented imports taxpayer. On top of that, we did reallocation for budget to the state government, so to regional government. We have additional 15 trillion to help the regional government in different source. So we have DID, Regional Incentive Fund. We also have Special Allocation Fund, DAK, 9 trillion to help to reallocate into spending that relates to COVID stimulus. And then we also have provision of loan facilities to the region around 1 trillion. So these are the overall support for the government. First, we support in the form of government expenditure is around 427 trillion, including the consumption support, the tax support for the business sector, focusing on the SME, loan interest subsidies, biofuel, collateral, and compensation payment to strategic sector like Pertamina and PLN. We also have from the financing side, this is below the line, we call it PMN, State Capital Participation, placement of government fund, we call it penempatan dana pemerintah, the guarantee, and the investment. We also have, hold on. We also have additional expenditure for line ministries and local government, as I mentioned previously. So to sum up, better we continue in the discussion, but basically we're seeing this year many countries and also international organization is actually still expecting a V-shaped recovery, right? So very low, close to zero, or a little bit negative this year and started to recover next year. Even IMF predicted an 8% growth next year. For us, we think next year will be around 5%, going back to potential growth or a little bit lower. But the trajectory of the recovery will probably start on the fourth quarter this year, assuming that all this PSBB and all the physical distancing finally lowering the spread of the pandemic. So the first that got hit, of course, is the impact to production in quarter 2 and quarter 3, slowdown in tourism for sure, trade declining, manufacturing, and then it start to get hit to transportation sector and then consumption. But in the fourth quarter, if the conditions started to cool down, then this consumption activity will start to go back to normal, not going back to normal, but start to boost a little bit. So the current recovery projection is made under this assumption. State budget We just revised the current state budget for 2020 because of the additional expenditure needed for the response for COVID, and also the slowdown in tax revenue. Tax revenue grew negative 9.2%. Additional belanja negara expenditure around 100 trillion. So the deficit was planned to be around 5.07 or 850 trillion rupiah.
Ibu
Was revised to yes.
Can you? Your time is up.
Yes, this is the last slide.
Okay.
Yeah, and the deficit is revised to 1,000 or around 6% of GDP for this year. I think that's all, Pak Doni. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Bu. We can discuss further with Ibu Masita later during Q&A session. Next, we have Pak Andri Asmoro for your presentation.
Can see now, everyone?
Yes. Presentations, the presentation, Pak.
Oh yeah, okay. Right. Okay, thank you, Pak Doni, Bapak Ibu semua, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity for me to share about our view. So I would like to share several updates on impact of COVID to some sectors, including banking industry. So I try not to discuss much on the macro perspective because Ibu Masita already mentioned it and discussed it previously. So first of all, we have to aware that the impact of the COVID-19 to Indonesia is significantly different to what we had in 2008 and 1998 crisis, like Ibu Masita mentioned before. So if we compare its impact with the past crisis, we may say that economic crisis caused by COVID-19 is bigger than crisis in 2008 and 1998. In the past 3 decades, Indonesia at least experienced 3 economic crises, including this year. However, this time, economic crisis caused by COVID-19 is very different compared to the past 2 crises. Ibu Masita once again already mentioned about what's the differences, especially to the small, medium enterprises that previously actually become the backbone, now actually one of the part of the parties that experience a crisis. So COVID-19 crisis started from the health issues, which follow up with the restriction in people mobility because of the policy to flatten the pandemic that gave pressure to economic activity drastically. So the segment that impacted the most, like what we had here in 2020, is the MSME sector due to the weak cash flow. Yeah, and turn to corporate segment through the value chain. So we started from the SMEs and could spread out to the corporate level through the value chain, actually. So I think if we still have the significant impact from the COVID-19, we will see the impact more to the corporate level. So at the beginning of the year, we in Bank Mandiri made a stress test. I still remember at the time we made a stress test in January, even before government declared that it is a pandemic at the time. We made stress tests and we believe that at that time that the pandemic will only occur in 3 months or 1 quarter. But turn out right now we cannot expect even that the pandemic only have occurring in 1 semester. So we made a stress test that expected COVID-19 only last three months, and turn out we have to revise once again in March, and including the COVID-19 impact, prolonged COVID-19 impact. And the second one, I think what we have not forgot is that the impact of the oil price war between Arab Saudi and also Russia, that also changes our basic commodity prices assumption, faster and lower than before, actually. And the result is that the COVID-19 impact now hampers to most sectors and segments in Indonesia. Previously, we only discussed about the first round impact. Now we discuss about first round and also the second round impact. So for example, at the previous 1 to 3 months, for example, we only discussed about the hotel and airline industry that have declined sharply. Particularly in our data in March, numbers of tourists and hotel occupancy have dropped significantly. Right now, I think the occupancy rate of the hotel at around 6 to 10%, I think. Especially for the crude oil price, the oil price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia is another negative factor that drag down crude oil price. So it will also impact to the several sectors. So I think from the next slide, we can see that the combination of weak demand and disruption in supply has caused many industries to cut their initial target. So we can see here, for example, the sales of the auto is expected to drop around 40 to 50%. 50% is actually our worst case scenario for the auto sector. In fact, actually, for example, the auto sector already declined by 10% last year. So this is also because of the commodity prices declining since last year. So the commodity-related sectors really affect to the auto sector, for example. So if we want to know about the performance of the commercial vehicle, for example, it's really linked to the CPO prices. While for the commercial vehicle, it really linked to the coal sectors. So it is, I think, not surprising that of the industry, most of the association actually make their own target revision. So this is actually the performance of the commodity prices. Why we put one slide only for the commodity prices? Because Indonesia, like it or not, still depends on the commodity-related sectors until today. So the impact of the COVID-19 to the domestic economy and real sector has been also affected by lower commodity prices, and even faster than we had predicted before. So previously, we don't actually predict that, for example, the oil prices could drop to, for example, negative or even $10 per barrel, for example, in March or April. We only predicted in June, for example. Now we had it all the numbers. OPEC has also predicted that the global crude oil consumption growth will decline to 0.99 million barrel per day, lower than previous prediction of 1.2 billion million barrel per day. Lower oil price will also have impact to other commodities, including CPO, coal, and rubber. Yeah, so the only commodity prices that go up only gold. So I think now the demand for gold also increase, and we have to also cautious on the impact on the inflation, because now I think when people have a chance to get the money, for example, they don't only use it to buy food, but also I think some of them will buy also gold. The COVID-19 outbreak also affected CPO demand from China. China's import of rare materials will decline, as well as its exports, based on our data. Overall, China's consumption will decrease, including its demand for CPO. Now, going into the domestic issue, I think I want to highlight two things. Yeah, the first is how big is the impact? Yeah, the impact to the SME. Yeah, and also the people if they don't have any income at all. We make a simulation if they only have, for example, if they don't have income for 1 month or 3 months. Now, take a look closely on how big impact on the SMEs and people's purchasing power. The COVID-19 outbreak has created tremendous pressures on business sector, especially MSMEs, through two channels, supply and demand shocks. On the supply shock, restriction on the population mobility through social distancing, or work from home policies reduce the number of workers that operate businesses. So lockdowns and quarantine create operational shutdowns, and this adversely impact MSMEs that are unable to switch their operation into online. Based on our calculation, in DKI Jakarta could lose output around 3.4% of the GDP due to 3-month MSME sales stop. So if they don't, for example, if they don't have any revenue in 3 months, for example, the amount will be around 3.4% of the GDP. So neighboring region, for example, Bogor, Depok, Tangerang, and Bekasi may lose output up to 15.2% of their GDP from no demand at all in 3 months. The potential economic loss from closed MSMEs in DKI Jakarta is much lower than in Bodetabek, partly because DKI Jakarta's economy is largely made of medium and large companies. On the other hand, MSMEs have flourished in neighboring regions since Bodetabek is largely residential areas. Now we come to the purchasing power, people purchasing power. So sharp slowdown in economy due to pandemic will have an effect to employment situation in Indonesia. Whether people can survive or not, if there are no social restriction or job firing, is depend on their income. So asset income or business income. So we can see here, we assume using the Susenas data, people will depend on the other incomes outside of the salary, from the asset income and also business income. The spending ability or the survival is higher for people that have asset income plus business income. This is of course, Now, based on the simulation, based on the Susenas 2019, I'm looking at the data here, we estimate that 49 million households, around 174 million people may survive out of 71 million, if we take a look at this, out of 7 million household, for example, may survive without working for 1 month. While without working for 3 months, only 28.5 million household or 92 million will survive if they don't if they only have asset income. Furthermore, we estimate that 64 million households around 203 months, only 40.7 million households, or around 146.3 million people will survive if they have asset income and business income. So if they, for example, if they cannot get the salary in 3 months, many households will suffer actually compared to only 1 month. So this is the differences between what we had in 2008, 1998. In 2008 and 1998, we only focus on the poor people. But right now, I think it is across the board, especially when we discuss on the mid income class to lower income class.
Andri, time's up.
Yes. Oh, already 10 minutes?
Yes.
so I will ask another 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay.
So because I will come to the I will go to the banking sector, for example. So now to the banking industry. So actually the performance of the banking industry has not been represented in the February data. We only did in February data. So I will focus on this, the challenges for banking industry. So from the banking industry, the challenges will come from six areas. The first one is the uncertainties, how long the COVID-19 pandemic lasts. So the longer the pandemic, of course, the burden for the banking sector will also increasing. The second one is from the economic uncertainties, the downturn of the global economy that will affect to the transaction in the banking. And the third one is the lower commodity prices. Big banks, clients, especially, for example, many of them coming from the commodity-related sectors. So this will affect on the banking industry. And the 4, 5, and then 6 one, actually, it will create several pressures on the NPL and also the liquidity sectors. So the last slide I will include is actually the strategies from the banking sectors. So from the banking sectors, what actually can be done going forward to tackle all the challenges during the pandemic era. So the strategies to COVID-19 actually, currently measures have been conducted by banks facing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The current major step is to conduct loan structuring, to assist debtors that are impacted by the pandemic. I think it is also supported by the government using their stimulus. As economic uncertainties are rising, bank will be very prudent in loan disbursement right now, to maintain the asset quality and focusing on the prospective sectors that are quite immune relatively compared to other sectors such as pharmacy, telecommunication, and FMCG. Besides credit quality, banks will also maintain liquidity to meet its daily needs, to ensure sufficient liquidity. And banks have a number of options, including severely disbursed loan, funding through long-term bond issuance. I think that concludes my presentation. Actually, I still have several presentations, but I think if you have still questions, please do so in the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Andri. Next, we have Pak Yongki. Silakan, Pak Yongki.
Bisa lihat?
Ya, boleh. Oke.
Bisa lihat? Okay. Can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So basically, I'll share some data and also perspective based on 25 years of experience in the fast-moving consumer goods and retail. So I'm also part of board expert of several associations in the retail, okay, malls and tenants and also the suppliers, basically, okay. Okay, this is a hard time for Indonesia, but this is not going to last forever. So we will hopefully end somewhere, basically, yeah. All right, so about the economic downturn, basically, yeah. So our first quarter was hitting about 2.97%. And then some economists are really surprised. Why so fast? Because within that 13 weeks of quarter, COVID only hit like 3 weeks of it, basically. Why drop so fast, basically? Based on our data, basically the mid-low class has been losing their purchase power since 2017, basically. Okay, so there is a turnaround in 2018, but that's not long last, basically, and it's lowering again. Okay, so we have warned the government everything to try to help the mid-low class, focus on the mid-low class, basically, because the middle upper class, they have the money, but they just don't spend as much as before, basically, because they are very careful, basically, right? So we do probably project that the second quarter will be lower again from the first quarter, because we have not seen much of the cash fund to be distributed yet, yeah, to the lower class. So only part of it, basically. I really hope that by June, probably much of the cash fund to be distributed to help to for consumption, especially for the mid-low class, basically. Okay, so we understand that the two biggest contributors of Indonesian economic is industry and trade, basically. So industry, they cannot survive also without the trade, basically. So we need to help both, basically. So this is interrelated each other. Yeah. Now talking about the trade, basically. So we know that because of the PSBB, the lockdown Indonesian version, basically we close many of the trade activities, yeah, the malls, trade centers, pasar, etc., except probably the FMCGs, okay? And that's why I like to give a perspective that, you know, there are new words of new normals is everywhere, basically. So, but I can assure you that we are going back to normal in terms of the consumer behavior, etc. Okay, the 2 months pressure to change behavior into like online, etc., that only temporary. Okay, so we will shop again, etc., etc. And some perspective of the marketings, they said that certain potential winners, certain potential losers, basically, in some sectors. But I can assure you that during this COVID, all are losers, basically. So we do not see any sectors there is winners right now. Only probably health related sectors, basically. The rest are negative. So all the market size is shrinking, basically. Okay, I can provide the numbers here. Basically, like March to April is getting worse. So basically, lifestyle retail in the malls, basically, in March, basically shrink to only for like 40%. But then in April, we are left only like 5% or 0%, actually. Yeah. Hotels also the same thing. So we are left with 5% business, basically, or 0%, including F&B, restaurants, okay, food courts, etc., etc. So despite the online deliveries, so we only hit like 30% of our regular business, basically. So this is the reality. So that's why we are really concerned, basically, how we can prepare a recovery, basically, yeah, by June or July, basically, right? Because this is desperate. So all the businesses in trade, basically, are suffering on already like 2-3 months, basically, yeah. Now, I think Pak Bambang knows this, basically. So we are working how to unlock, basically. So this is the time that probably the government can help the business people, yeah. Both the central government and also the local government, yeah. So we, the trade industry do not need money basically. Actually, they need, but I don't think it's a requirement to be fulfilled in the short time, because government already spent a lot. Yeah, Bu Masita already explained that basically. We just need help that the government do not take the money from the business people right now, the trade basically. So by eliminating those tax basically, especially for the local government, the PBB is apa itu, pajak bangunan. So basically the building tax, the parking tax, the advertising tax basically. So we just need help them not to tax basically until December 2020. So the same with the central government, Bu Masita. So basically, we like to beg you to not to tax them basically until December 2020. So that will be a big help for them to survive until the end of this year. Then they will stay alive until next year. So next year will be they are ready to pay tax again for the government basically. Yeah. So this is like a chain got locked basically. So for the supply chain in the industry basically, we have studied basically. We do a lot of FGD. So mall today cannot open because the tenant don't want to open basically. Why they don't want to open? Because they are all in negative cash flow. So they don't want to be charged with the rental fee, and also service charge that is high, and tax basically. Yeah. They cannot, because the cost is just impossible basically. So they require the mall to give them free rental, but they cannot, because what? Because they have to pay the loan, and also they have to pay the tax to the local government basically. So it's a locked chain basically. If the mall cannot open, the retailer can open, then the manufacturers and the small medium companies who supply to the retailers also got locked basically. So this is a locked, total lockdown basically. Okay, they cannot move basically. So this has to be open through top to down basically, and the mall. So they need help. Yeah, the mall need help to really focus on tax and focus on loans basically, to let them get positive on cash flow, and pass it down to the retailers basically, F&B and etc. etc. Then they will also pass it down to the small, medium, etc. etc. Yeah. Let me pass basically. I will explain later on. Let me skip. So basically, I'm sure, because we have studied this like 25 years. Yeah, we will back to normal basically. What's going on during the COVID basically is just a temporary. Yeah. For example, you can see that people say that, wow, industry like canned meat, canned food basically will be boosting for the future. Nope. So basically, it's only happening in the panic buying. So it's up and down again already. Yeah. But it's up again because of what? Because of the fasting season. So we are being helped by the fasting season. So those some of the food industry is up again. Yeah. Instant noodle is still down also. Yeah. Now vitamins. Everybody say that, wow, okay, vitamins. Well, it's up, then down again. Yeah. Basically, it's already down basically for vitamins. DKI Jakarta, okay, all for FMCG categories basically is up only during panic buying, but now it's down again. So basically, purchase power. Okay, this is another important for government to help to improve the purchase power. If the mall is open, the retail is open, it's useless without the new demand basically. So we need to create both the supply and demand, yeah, to restart and jumpstart this situation basically. So I create a projection basically. Okay, for FMCG, I think Andre already explained before. FMCG is okay today because our supermarkets, our mini markets still can do business basically because they are open. Yeah. So I expect a stable growth, not a jump. Because jump means everybody is focusing on that categories, right? But stable because we have no seasonal anymore, so festive, etc. Okay, and we do hope that the next year will be a jump because we grow low this year. Yeah. Now for F&B, restaurants, and also lifestyle retail in the mall, it is a burn. Since Indonesian angus basically, so we are really burned down. Yeah, the business down to zero basically, growth and negative cash flow. So we need to rebuild this basically. So we need help from the government not to tax them basically. They will use the money, leftover money, to rebuild the business basically. Today, many of for example, the sales promotion girl has been dirumahkan tuh apa, left to home basically. Okay, some of them already lay off, but many of them still lay to home. Why they keep it at home? Because they don't want to lay off, because it's taking a training, taking time to train new ones basically. Takes like 2 months to train a new ones basically. So they want to do jump start as soon as possible, either June or July basically, so they can rebuild. And remember, I just explained that despite if we are able to rebuild the business, we are only expect to reach like 50% of our regular business until the end of this year. So it's not going to be 100%, because number one, the purchase power is not there. Number two is social distancing is there. So the capacity of the selling, the restaurants will be limited, right? So to keep it distance basically. That's the problem. But we do hope that looking at Ibu Masita's projections next year, etc., we agree.
Halo Pak Yongki.
Yeah, we agree that this the lockdown. Basically, we will be able to do it region by region. So it's not going to be total Indonesia because we are so large. So it should be region by region, and hopefully, the big one will be Java. If Java can be a secure island, that will be a big help to the economy, basically. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Pak. Thank you so much, Pak Yongki.
Tony?
Next we have Pak Bambang. Silakan Pak Bambang.
Oh, hold on.
Udah kelihatan kok, Pak.
Udah ya?
Udah.
Oke. Ya, oke. Terima kasih. Malah di tempat saya nggak kelihatan. Wait a minute.
Zoom-nya di-minimize.
Zoom-nya minimize ya. Oke. Oke, ya. Terima kasih. Good noon, I think, yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you very much for letting me have a presentation here about COVID-19 update, so Economic and Political Review 2020. I can't move my things here.
Page down aja Pak, yang gampang Pak, page down.
Udah. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that technical glitch, but here is the glitch that the government need to address during the COVID. Sometimes people in social, political, or management study think about the trolley problem. Here is the government is holding a switch for the rail. There is the COVID train, and if you switch to one side, it will kill the people. If you switch to the other side, it will kill the economy. But no matter how you switch, it will come back. Maybe you first kill the people and then later on kill the economy too. Because no people, no economy. If you kill the economy, the people will be killed too. So what to do? This is what they call the trolley problem. And depend on government around the world reacted in different way. Here, in case of our government, we call it denial first, overwhelm later. Yeah, at first menyangkal, Indonesians are super duper, like the virus cannot hit us. But later on, when it happened, then we were overwhelmed. And if you look at the global benchmarking of this reaction, we are actually what I consider a late and haphazard response. Indonesia, we are the same league as United States of America and Brazil. It's very different than the best response is early and aggressive response is Vietnam and Taiwan. It's very interesting. Vietnam and Taiwan, one is a communist country, the other one is a very democratic country. Vietnam, during the plague time, they don't even have a minister of health because the minister of health retired in November. But in Taiwan, they have the vice president who is an epidemiologist, an expert. But the similarities between Vietnam and Taiwan only that both were traumatized by the experience of the first plague, which is SARS in 2002. I mean, so many doctors and experts died in 2002, so they were very traumatized. So when they heard about what happened in China, and both these countries also share they don't trust China because of their historical background, they already reacted before China reacted. And because they are reacted early, so they are actually, in Vietnam, nobody died actually until now. In Taiwan, very few people died. And they don't have to do big lockdown because they managed to get early. China and South Korea, they were a bit later, but they respond aggressively, lockdown like Wuhan. Late but aggressive response, Germany, Italy. Already too many infection, but in Germany, relatively very few died. Late and measured response is Netherlands and Sweden. It's almost like a herd immunity response, but a bit managed. And we are in the late and haphazard response, but we are still one thing better than Belarus, which basically no response. They are basically still on denial until now. Now, why Indonesia, Brazil, and United States has this response? I think part of the thing is because of our domestic political situation. In the case of Indonesia, if you go to the memory lane, we have a very strange bad fellow here in Indonesia. First, you remember the first thing started with Prabowo actually with Megawati supported Jokowi and Ahok as governor and vice governor of Jakarta. At that time, Megawati and Prabowo was very close, that Megawati even decided not to support her husband pick of Governor Fokke at that time. But then after Jokowi became a governor, then Megawati in the last minute supported Jokowi to become Indonesian first president again. At that time, Prabowo. So this is a change position. And then at that time, then Jokowi has a spokesperson named Anies Baswedan to support him against Prabowo. And then we know that Jokowi won. And then Jokowi make Anies Baswedan as his Minister of Education. And then for some reason, fire him. And then suddenly, then Prabowo decided to support Anies Baswedan to compete against candidate Governor Ahok of Jakarta. So it's very interesting. This is the competition between a former Prabowo candidate against current Prabowo candidate. And then Anies won, and then Jokowi versus Prabowo again. Jokowi won. And then I think this is unique, only happened in Indonesia. The loser of a presidential candidate become a minister of defense for the president-elect. And now, since Jokowi will no longer run in 2024, then Jokowi is looking at somebody who might be competing against next presidential candidate. One of them is probably Anies Baswedan. If you look at the Paul. So this is what I call the frenemy situation, which is a person or group that is friendly toward another because the relationship bring benefits, but harbor feeling of resentment or rivalry. So you can look at their picture, they look at smiling at each other, but they are also backstabbing each other. Now, the other reason why Indonesia, Brazil, and United States also similar is because Indonesia is a big and diverse country. Indonesia is largest archipelago in the world. It's fourth most populous in the world. One of most populated island, Java Island, is about 100 million people. But it also got one of the least dense big island. And when you look at this and you look at the COVID in Indonesia, you look at the national epidemic curve, it doesn't make sense. But if you look at each area differently, then it does make sense. And why is the reason? The reason because the attack of COVID is not the same time at every place, and they need its own course. And the thing about COVID is really is challenge to our leadership. As I mentioned in my first presentation, is they call it the trolley dilemma, or it is actually the tyranny of or. But actually, is it really the tyranny of or? Now it became like a competition between Jokowi way of handling the virus versus Anies. But actually, it's because of their background. If you look at the background of US president, Brazilian president, and Indonesian president, they all came from business. So their first reaction is to save the economy. Anies Baswedan came from the university, from academic. The academic has a tendency to choose for the people health or people safety. So it seemed like, are we really in this competition between choosing the economy or choosing the people safety? And I think actually it's not true, because if you look at the science of virus, hypothetically, if you have one leader who can then say, okay, people of Jakarta, let's stay at home 2 weeks. If everybody follow 2 weeks, after 2 weeks, we will have no more virus in Jakarta. But the problem is just a few person don't follow this rule, then we still have virus. The more people don't follow the rules, the more you have a problem with the virus extend its life. So that's why we look at countries that has a good leaders that can unite the people. For instance, we look at New Zealand. I have to admit that most of the lady leader has this capability to unite their people against a common enemy, while the male alpha leader tend to actually split the country into either A or B. Only one will win. If you look at the US, they even brought their gun to protest against the lockdown. So having said that, I think if I take a long-term view until 2024, for Indonesia, this is a very good way to see who's among our local leaders will be a good candidate for our president in 2024. Because this will be the one who will find a way to get out of the tyranny of or and enter into the genius of N. And if you look at area Indonesia, very interesting to find that in Bali, despite all the worry of epidemics, Bali is actually doing quite well against this virus. And the reason is because in Bali, what works is not the modern political system, but the adat system, the customary leadership. And one of the reasons is because Balinese is a Hindu. Hindu is a religion that is in balance with the nature. It's not that humans is number one and nature number two. Hindu is a balance. So Hindus religion in Bali already have wisdom when to face a plague. So
Bambang,
yeah.
thank you, Pak.
Yeah, so
Thumbs up.
I close this down with saying, so let's watch at all the local area, watch their leaders, and the one who's doing well, maybe will be our president in 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Bambang. Last but not least is Ralph van Doorn.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see my screen now. So we're going to look here at the outlook and challenges of Indonesia. Of course, a lot of things have already been said. So I may skip through a few slides to focus maybe on the final parts. To set up the stage, you know, if you look at the IMF projections, which are the latest global projections, you see that there will be they project a global recovery. But you can see in level terms, post-COVID, the level of global demand will be lower, whether we look at advanced economies in blue or developing economies and emerging markets in red. Right, so we will live in a different world post-COVID. Similarly, if you look at commodity price projections, those that are relevant for Indonesia, energy prices, metals and minerals, they will not recover for the next few years. Food commodities will recover, and palm oil is, I think, one of them. So that will recover, but you know there will be an impact well beyond 2020 of COVID. Our projections at the World Bank for East Asia show indeed that before the crisis started, we saw growth in the around 5%, 6% on average. The red bar is our early April forecast for 2020, significantly downgraded. For Indonesia, our baseline is 0%, and in the worst case, if the large-scale social restrictions continue for the next few months beyond what has been announced, growth could slip to even minus 3.5%. But Indonesia wouldn't be the only country, as you can see. And especially open economies, look at Malaysia and Thailand, they would be the most exposed to growth shocks. So here let me skip through this. So we do expect in the medium term a recovery of growth, as supposing that Indonesia will, the global economy will recover. But it will be with a lot more poverty. Poverty is projected to go up pretty strongly, undoing a lot of years of poverty reduction that has happened over the last 7 years. That's the unmitigated impact. But of course, the government has announced a whole range of social protection measures. Last month for about 110 trillion, and then a few days ago, this was extended. A few programs were extended by a few months, which seems to make sense, especially since we think that the program announced in April, that was not enough to completely offset the impact. So even the 110 trillion package for social protection that was announced last month would not have been enough to fully offset the impact of poverty. So poverty would still go up. Now it has been extended by another 3 months. Several of the packages, I believe the electricity subsidy and the BLT Jabodetabek and outside Jabodetabek. We will have to do the simulations to see to what extent this helps, as an adequate safety measure. If we go back to the macro, we think Indonesia will go through this crisis on the external side. They will manage. We don't think the current account will be impacted a lot. The Q1 BOP came out today. I haven't yet looked at it. but we expect that the major adjustment of the current account or balance of payments is on the financing side. We initially projected a very large and sustained outflow of non-resident investors. It seems that has slowed down now, this outflow, which is good news. At the same time, Indonesia has been issuing bonds up to about 7 billion. And initially they expect about 4 billion from multilateral and bilateral partners. And that together will probably, and the use of reserves will probably offset the impact on the balance of payments. Pre-crisis, reserves were pretty adequate at 9.1 months of imports. And also post-crisis, we expect it to be still adequate. Plus, you have a network of currency swaps, including one with the US Federal Reserve of 60 billion. So here we are, we see that Indonesia will go through this well. On the fiscal side, we do see, of course, a widening fiscal deficit of 6.3% of GDP announced earlier in the week. We do think that this will be, there will be more challenges to finance it, but we know already you will use your own funds, and the Bank Indonesia has already pledged to buy about 25% of the bonds that will be issued. And again, together with the hopefully slow down in the outflow of non-resident investors and the multilateral bilateral packages, this will be financed. This will be able to be financed. However, if you look at the debt, we expect that to go up to 37% of GDP and then continue in the medium term. If you look at on the right, it's a typical debt sustainability analysis of a baseline and a projection, kind of alternative scenarios. So we do think that Indonesia's debt will stabilize in the medium term, but it's important to remain credible. For example, Indonesia must maintain its hard-earned market confidence, which it took years to build up and which can be lost very easily. Markets seem to have welcomed the recent package, but the credit rating agencies have signaled concerns about medium term. So it's important to show a credible path for the economy, how we can unwind all these exceptional measures. For example, reinstating the deficit ceiling, ending the partial financing of the deficit, and also making sure that revenue goes back to its pre-2018 level, which will only happen with additional tax reforms. Okay, that goes, yeah. So in the short term, we expect Indonesia to continue to work on, in the containment part, to work on protecting livelihoods and food security and help firms hibernate by minimizing the fixed costs. But you also have to start thinking about recovery, the gradual reopening, how to wake up these hibernated firms, avoiding more hazard, but also erosion of the tax base, which already is narrow. How to repair balance sheets, how to make sure workers don't lose their skills, and especially how to attract new investments. That means structural reforms, including the omnibus law on job creation, has to be, improved, but then hopefully also adopted. Attracting more infrastructure investment and human capital investment. How can this be done? Well, for the 2021 budget, we hope Indonesia will focus on, in a safe way, minimize the time that mobility restrictions need to be put in place. Think about the trade-off. Supporting the poor, vulnerable, and informal sectors and ensuring adequate food supply. Helping firms repurpose or hibernate, and implementing structural reforms, especially omnibus law. But we do think it has very strong reform momentum in it, but we do think, for example, the strong environmental protections that Indonesia has today should not be thrown out. So they should not be touched by the omnibus law. And similarly, the labor reform provisions may be better postponed to the future for more comprehensive labor reform post-COVID, so that you can speed up the adoption of this bill and start attracting investment post-COVID that Indonesia needs so much. So Indonesia needs to spend more and better during and post-crisis, but there will be permanently fewer resources because of tax breaks and tax cuts. So how can you do that? In the remaining few minutes, I would like to quickly show a few things about testing. So Indonesia is, compared to, say, ASEAN or compared to the world, at the bottom of testing per million people. 743 tests, and Philippines, which is kind of in a similar situation in many ways, has already 2.5 times as many tests per million. So Indonesia doesn't really know how widespread the infection is, but mobility restrictions have had a bite. If you look at the drop in mobility from January to March on the left, where pink means drop of about 15%. And then until April, where red means about 60%, there has been a significant drop in mobility, even outside the areas that have actually imposed a partial lockdown. And that means that Indonesia's, there has been mounting losses of activity and a significant rise in poverty, and especially in countries such as Indonesia, where you have, lower income countries have, fewer jobs that can be done at home. So lockdown restrictions have a very large disproportionate cost in countries like Indonesia, where many sectors are exposed and cannot be simply done at home. So here I think this is what the previous presentation said. There's a dilemma. How can you avoid widespread economic distress, but also make sure you control the pandemic? So how can you better inform policy action? And the result, there it is really about more testing. And Indonesia's testing should go well beyond what they're doing today. We had a seminar 2 weeks ago where we spoke about, you need to do representative tests across the entire country using the Susanas or health service style testing. You test not because you want to save people's health, but you just want to have a statistical sense how widespread the infection is in other provinces. And they may be able to tailor your shutdown, your partial lockdown on those actual spreads, statistics, using the other tests. I'm almost done, sorry. The other tests you use for treatments. This will expand your possibilities. The trade-off between health benefits and economic benefits expands from the purple line to the blue line if you have more testing. So the key messages are there will be a deep global downturn, and there will be spreading to Indonesia. There will be a sizable rise in poverty. We see fiscal packages shifting away from health to health, social assistance, and industry support, away from infrastructure. And there's still a lot to be done in 2020. So in recovery, focus on boosting spending on infrastructure, maintaining spending on human capital, and ensure financial soundness. And focus a fiscal strategy on credible measures to raise revenue back to at least the 2018 level to make sure you flatten the debt curve. And then on testing, it's not a silver bullet, but Indonesia needs to test a lot more to help to alleviate this very strong trade-off between economic health and public health. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rolf. Before we begin our question and answer session, I would like to acknowledge our corporate sponsor. First is Pak Darmono, Chairman of Jababeka. Second is Pak Umesh Patke, President Director of L'Oreal Indonesia. Third is Pak VP Sharma, Group CEO of Mitra Adi Perkasa. We have Pak Rio Winardi, President Director of BCA Life. And lastly, we have Pak Tia Grajan, President Director of PT TVS Motor Company Indonesia. I would like to give priority to our corporate sponsors to ask questions. Silakan, Pak.
Okay. Well, I've got one question to Ibu Marcella and one question to Pak Bambang Harimurti. So first is to Marcella. Ibu Sri Mulyani already mentioned that this situation now is worse than 1998. And she predicted that the growth will be minus 2.3%. But in 1998, actually, the growth was minus 15%. So this is inconsistent that on the one hand, she said it's worse than 1998, but the prediction for the growth was only minus 2.something%. So that is my question, how actually can we, the business people, get more, what we call, clearer prediction, although this is still very difficult for anybody to predict. And in 1998, we got the help from IMF with the $40 billion injection. So the recovery of the economy was relatively fast. But today, IMF cannot bail out so many countries who are in trouble. So the only, what is the strategy for the economic recovery to make Indonesia competitive for foreign investors to come? And the area which we were hoping was the omnibus law, which seems to be difficultly passed on now. So that is the other question. And then to Pak Bambang Harimukti, the strange bedfellow in the political arena, is that a bad thing or a good thing, actually? Because to me, again, we need to have the balance between the health and the economy. And by having strange bedfellows, actually it works very well. Today is health first, tomorrow is economy first. So it keeps actually the economy going, but also the health improving. So that means that we need outside factors to help the economy of Indonesia. So Pak Bambang, you are a specialist in economy and also politics. So this possibly require a political answer, also in terms of the global situation. The real problem now is actually the war between the China and USA in terms of trade war. Because if these two blocs keep fighting, the rest of the world will suffer, especially during this kind of situation. So these are my two questions. Thank you.
Silakan Ibu Masita, Pak Bambang.
Terima kasih buat pertanyaannya, Pak. So I cannot answer on behalf of Ibu Sri Mulyani, but I can tell you what I understand of the situation right now, yeah. So because the source of the crisis is pandemic itself, of course, the economic trajectory of recovery and also how big the economy will be impacted will depend on the pandemic, right? Will depend on the length of the pandemic and will depend on the depth of the pandemic as well. So a lot of analysts has been talking about a V-shape, U-shape, L-shape. In fact, if you believe that there could be a second or third wave of pandemic, it could be a W shape where the economic started to recovery and then go down again. I guess the difference with the 98 is that this possibility that the economy can go to a recovery period that is longer or deeper than people expect, depending on the length and depth of the pandemic itself. But so that part, we are not health expert and nobody actually know when the pandemic will be over, but the government have to have some kind of scenario, right? With the current information that we have, how we read the economy, we are making the scenario that the economy will probably grow between minus 0.4% to positive 2.3% this year. Of course, second and third quarter growth will go down. In fact, could be negative, but I'm talking about annual overall year growth rate. So I guess maybe the difficulty of determining the impact of crisis and how to create the policies that react to this kind of crisis depend a lot on the pandemic. Second, on the omnibus law, Pak, I guess it's aimed to improve investment condition in Indonesia. There are actually two big parts, right, from the omnibus law for taxation, for example. First is the tariff rate cut, yeah, the tax rate cut. This has been addressed in the Perpu number 1/2020. So part of the omnibus law is already a regulation, a law now under Perpu. And then the second part is tax holiday and then super deduction, tax incentive. We currently have this in different regulation of PMK. It's separated regulation, not in one regulation, but a big part of it has already started to implement that. So I guess even though the omnibus is still in parliament right now, I guess more than 50% of what we have planned on the law is actually already rolling currently. I think that's all. Thank you, Pak.
Pak Bambang, silakan.
very interesting, tough question. But I totally agree. Actually, this strange bedfellow is actually better for Indonesia than if we don't. Oh, I have to. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Bambang. I think you are right. I think strange bedfellow is actually, we are lucky we have this strange bedfellows situation in one sense. For instance, you can imagine if right now Pak Prabowo is still in opposition and not inside the cabinet, our situation would be much more unstable. But fortunately, and this is a very strange, I think unique in the world, that a former presidential candidate who lost became a minister to the presidential candidate who won. I think it's probably Pancasila way, Pak. And that make the situation now much more manageable politically than if it didn't happen. And the other thing that's good about this is because actually Gerindra and PDIP are both nationalist party. It's good that they are now staying in coalition, because otherwise the extreme on both sides will be more influential. Then will become like in Israel, where both Labor and Likud, which is actually two big moderate party, because they fight against each other, then the smaller, more radical party on each side have much more influence than their size. Now with the PDIP and Gerindra actually on the similar nationalist bloc vote, is actually create more stability to Indonesia. But that's why the instability is now only concentrated only in Jakarta, because the competition is no longer much more focused Jakarta and maybe 3-4 other provinces, small provinces. So that's why it is much more manageable. So if Pak Jokowi can manage with his strange bedfellowness, King Javanese way, this competition with Jakarta, because Jakarta is 50% of money around the whole Indonesia, I think will become even better. And I see this potential is actually quite high. That's why I don't disagree when the CEO magazine, in the word CEO magazine, consider Indonesia among the top 4 best country to invest. I think because in a socio-political arena, compared to other countries all over the world, Indonesia is okay. And one of the reasons is because we are archipelagic nation. So sometimes if the fighting is across the ocean or the sea, it's much more manageable than if it is in one specific area. So in this case, I think Ibu Masita, for instance, also please look at Indonesia not as one lump country, but you have to look Indonesia as very large, diverse country and manage it accordingly. So then we have more stability. You can imagine a country like Indonesia is actually for the future attack by virus. We are much more easier to defend, learning from the what we learn now. If we use Vietnam way or Taiwan way dealing with the virus, in the next virus attack, Indonesia would probably become the heaven for capital when the world is attacked by pandemic again, because we are like a ship with a lot of containment. If one leak, you can contain it in that block. You know, it's not like other, which is very difficult to control the border. So so I'm actually very optimistic. If we can learn from what happened now, we are in a better position to compete with the rest of the world economically. But the next thing, I think, maybe Pak Bambang Darmono will also have to face this. We remember during the first depression in the US, there was no minimum wage, right? But after that, the idea of minimum wage was accepted by the whole world. I think what will happen in the future after this pandemic is the idea of universal basic income will be much more accepted by the world. In fact, Spain are now going to put it. And don't forget that the idea of universal basic income did not originate from the bleeding heart liberal. It's actually originate from the Republican Party, because if you have universal basic income, then you don't have minimum wage. You can fire and hire anytime. You can be very efficient. If you have a wabah like now, a pandemic like now, you don't have to hibernate, because nobody will die of being, hungry, because you have a universal basic income. And if we have the universal basic income based on taxes, that means that the job of a country is only to ensure that most people pay more taxes than the universal basic income. Because if you have a universal basic income in place, even Pak Bambang Darmono will accept it, the same amount. Maybe you can give it to your driver, doesn't matter, but everybody entitled to it. So I think, I hope like Ibu Masita and Minister of Finance will start thinking how to implement universal basic income in post-COVID Indonesia. Nigeria is already on that path. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak. I will read 3 questions from the public, and unfortunately, it's not addressed to anyone in particular. First one is from Alfs Davidson from New Zealand Embassy. Post-COVID is a change and to reprioritize and advance climate change. Does Indonesia have any plans to support green recovery? And her second question is, what advice does the World Bank and others have for Indonesia to support a green transition? Okay, next questions I have is from, sorry, one second, let me read this. From Akmal Fadurrahman to Ibu Masita, Bloomberg recently have a story about unhealthy balance sheet of Perumnas and Garuda. The debt to EBITDA ratio is 4 times. Does the government prepare for BUMN bailout in the future? And last questions is from Benny from Astra. What are the major changes in social and market behavior due to COVID in the near future that may impact the companies in production and trading business? I open the floor to anyone who can answer that question.
Well, I know one thing that maybe a little bit of answer to this is, especially because I'm involved in the electric vehicle project in Indonesia, and also the upstream side of it. Many people maybe don't realize that Indonesia is the largest producer of high-grade nickel in the world. And I think now many countries, I think at least China already there, but South Korea and also US is also interested in creating battery production in Indonesia, because we have all the material, including the rare earth, and we have also the market. So and I know right now that Indonesian policymakers are also thinking, because of the problem between China and United States, there is a possibility many company will move their company from China to Indonesia, and even from not only foreign company in China to Indonesia, but also Chinese company to Indonesia, in order to be able to access to US market. and one of the things that is a hindrance to electric vehicle future is what we call the carbon track of that battery, for instance. And because of that, there is actually a very good push in Indonesia to produce this battery in a green way, basically using electricity not from coal, but from more renewable energy, like from hydro or from geothermal. So I think I can see already on the horizon, there is a very good opportunity as long as we are doing it right. Indonesia has a track record of making bad policies during good time. So I hope this track record remain, that now we are in a very bad times, and Indonesia will make a good policy. I think that's a challenge for Ibu Masita and in her office especially. And Pak, again, to answer Pak Bambang Darmono question about China versus US, Indonesia has to restart its own genius during the Cold War, which is gerakan non-blok, Pak.
Yes,
non-aligned movement. Yeah.
Correct. Stiono Juandi, Pak, bukan Bambang.
Yeah.
Stiono Juandi Darmono.
Stiono Juandi Darmono. Sorry, Pak. Karena ingatnya Bambang terus. So we have to start a new economic non-aligned movement. And I think ASEAN should be at the forefront of it. And I think we can benefit from that. And that would be a green non-aligned movement, Pak. Because the future of the planet Earth, during the Cold War, we create non-aligned because the future of the planet Earth was threatened by nuclear war. But now actually it's threatened by global warming. So it's about time that Indonesia, maybe with President University, Pak, started to revive our genius of creating a better world.
Okay.
Thank you, Pak.
Maybe Ralph, you want to take a step on the World Bank view of the green transition, and then after that, Ibu Masita to answer the BUMN bailout, and Pak Yongki on the future of trading business post-COVID.
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. So there are perhaps 5 parts we can talk about creating a more sustainable future for Indonesia post-COVID. The one is about the trade-off between investment and the environment. In our opinion, there's no such trade-off. Yes, there may be individual firms who would like more relaxed environmental regulations, but there are many firms and increasing investment funds that want the opposite. So you may lose a few investors, you may gain a lot more investors if you keep your environmental regulations at the level as they are today, which is very high standards. So don't lose those standards, because they don't only not help you attract more investment, but it also will put the poor people at risk who live in environmentally vulnerable areas. A second, deal with marine plastics, which threatens the fisheries sector, but also the tourism sector. The plastic bags excise and the more general plastic excise will give both gains. You get environmental benefits, and you have an increased tax base, which is something Indonesia needs most. Think about a fuel excise, which will help both with making companies more efficient in energy production, but also consumers more efficient in energy consumption. It may also help narrow down your current deficit, because you will import less refined oil. It will help reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, and also put renewable energy at a more equal footing with conventional energy. And maybe this is the time to do it post-COVID, the time for big reforms. And then finally, the green future also means agricultural reforms. There are many benefits of increasing the quality of agricultural spending in Indonesia. At the moment, most spending goes into the fertilizer subsidy, but that subsidy doesn't go, to the farmers that need it most. It tends to go up. It tends to be repurposed in kind of other non-subsidized businesses and benefits big farmers. But if you were to reallocate spending into things like seeds, introducing new seeds to farmers, supporting small-scale farmers through income support, sponsor more agricultural R&D, you may end up having a lot more benefits. For example, you may improve food security for the poor. You may increase agricultural incomes, but also you have, you can have reduce the overuse of fertilizer in agriculture, which leads to externalities on other farmers. So the environmental footprint would also be reduced. Right? And this may be, again, you have a tight budget in 2020 after you exclude health and social assistance. And post-COVID, the budget will remain tight because you have a higher level of debt. And it means for the same budget, you'll spend more on interest than you can spend on other items in your budget. So a lot of this will have to be, you can work on a sustainable future, which is consistent with, a stronger fiscal position and better incomes. And that's something we would certainly support.
Thank you, Rolf. Ibu Masyita, pertanyaan mengenai BUMN. Silakan,
Oke,
Bu.
Pak. I'll try ya. So basically, the government is currently working on different support to the SOE. So we know that SOE have issues like other corporate sectors in terms of the disrupted supply and also the weaker demand, and also other operational limitation that was due to the COVID-19. Limited business activity and solvency and liquidity issues that also affect profitability issues. In the Perpres 54 on the revised budget, there's an allocation for subsidy expenditure compensation and capital injection to SOE. We also have other support that I mentioned earlier. But basically, because funding is not unlimited, of course, we also have to take into account the space from the fiscal side. But in order to make a priority, the government have 5 criteria for SOE that can receive support. First, its impact on people's life. So the higher the impact, for example, it's basic necessities like PLN, Pertamina, then it's becoming a higher priority. 2, it's a sovereign role in the SOE operation. Exposure to financial system, because this could have systemic impact to banking system and financial system in general. 4, government ownership within that specific SOE that needs to be supported, and also the size of asset compared to the economy. For the one-by-one case, such as the one that asked by the questions, we currently don't have exact announcement yet because we're working on this on the case-by-case basis within the ministry and in coordination with the Ministry of SOE. Thank you.
Next, Pak Yongki, tentang social and market behavior post-COVID to trading business, Pak.
Oke, saya rasa Pak Andri yang akan jawab. Dia punya data-data yang lebih lengkap ya, masalah manufacturers-nya gitu loh. Andri?
Pak Andri, suaranya pecah-pecah nih.
Pak Andri, suaranya pecah-pecah,
So
Pak.
about the industry, about the industry and also the behavior, social and market. Can you hear me now? Oh, because hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Bisa sekarang, okay. So about the social and market behavior, the first one that we have to remember is that number one is the vaccine will not be found in the near term. Yeah, so we have to deal with it with the new normal. So then the second one is health is the number one priority. So without priority in health, we cannot produce and to be more productive. So we have to also remember that. And the third one thing that we have to learn is that from the working from home is how we optimize the digital. So I think the social and market behavior will be directed to the certain direction like that. So the first one, I think the market will be very conscious on the healthcare, on the how to social distancing, create several arrangement in, for example, in production. So of course, until the vaccine is found, we cannot get fully like 100% of the total sales or revenue like what we had before the pandemic COVID-19 happens. So about the industry, yeah, I think the number one, Indonesia still have the opportunity, huge opportunity about the healthcare industries and also food and beverages industries. So this is what we call the defensive industries that always be a huge opportunity to grow going forward. And the second one, I think we also have to remember that COVID-19 pandemic give us one thing, that many countries and producers itu start to reallocate their source of the raw materials from China and also finding to other countries. So I think Indonesia have the opportunity to grab this investment and also the production. So given to that current situation, I think the raw materials provider and producer will be very big opportunity to grow going forward, for example, in the next 5 years or 7 years or even 10 years. And the second one, I think in the near term, electronic and also automotive sector will still have the opportunity to grow because the potential of the exports to our neighboring countries is still huge. And one thing we have to remember also, Indonesia becoming the manufacturing hub to this situation. Of course, we need to improve our productivity and competitiveness first. Yeah, the first thing that we have to also take notes is that we have to be healthy first. Yeah, the pandemic first, and then after that we can go directly to improve the competitiveness in the manufacturing sectors. That's the answer.
Pak Yongki, silakan ditambah, Pak.
Yeah, okay. So let me share some of my file here. Can you see?
Yeah.
Okay.
Digedein, Pak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, this is the behavior, consumer behavior based on my 25 years with Nielsen, basically. So we study every year during the 98 or 2008 or during any crisis. Yeah. Number one, after post-crisis, okay, we will see people will be saving, so they will buy cheaper brands, basically. Okay, temporary. Once the economy is getting better, so they will go back into their premium brands, basically. Okay, so we will see a lot of people are probably doing savings, holding cash, instead of spending spree, basically. Number two, they will still go to offline. Okay, definitely offline. You will see that online helping during COVID, but then after COVID, then they will go back to online, offline. Okay, so the supermarkets, mini markets, and then the traditional shops basically will be still the choice of the Indonesians. The market share in the meantime is about 70% of the traditional, and then 30% in the 29% in the modern, and then 1% of e-commerce. So e-commerce of FMCG is very small, basically. Okay, so that's the picture that I took during the COVID. Okay, so people are still lining up, but that's especially have a special that's a payday, in April, and also the beginning of the fasting. Okay, they are still flooding into the stores. McKinsey studies basically from 100% of consumers, 52% because of COVID, they are looking for store that is closer, that is easier to buy, basically, in the meantime, But then after COVID, 98% will go back to their original channels, basically, Online. So what can we sell online, Pak? So online only a bit better for baby products, diapers, powder milk, etc. And then also for cosmetics, okay? So the share is a bit larger, about 3%. Okay, focus on those three, basically. The rest is not not aspirative category basically. What you do well on online, basically still the trendy stuff basically, yeah, the fashions, electronics, health and beauties, and then babies and moms, and then home living. Those are aspirative categories. The rest, no. Okay, because people are looking for trendy products on internet because they are faster than the offline basically, yeah, to find products, to find the trends, etc., etc. Okay, so I don't want any of the retailers spend much investment on online basically. Okay, so this is the behavior you cannot change by only 2 months or 4 months force of using online basically. Yeah, we have reported that all Indonesians offline retailer today, they already have online, but they cannot boost the sales that fast basically. Yeah, still people love online because I will explain later. Okay, so basically go back to normal. To me, you can see the trend of the canned meat, fish that people think that wow, it's going to be a good categories to sell, but you see after the COVID that is a bit lowering down already. Frozen food is the same, it's going up again because of the beginning of the fasting basically. Instant noodle also still down basically. So but this is also involved the combination of category will be attractive to go in Indonesia. Vitamin, the same thing, people will think that wow, vitamin business will be huge in the future. Well, not exactly. So after COVID, probably people will forget to take vitamins already. Okay, so you can see that there is already lowering here. And Jakarta people, as you know, that FMCG is not that aspiring. Okay, I have seen Jakarta growth is the lowest in the country for FMCG because Jakarta people have more money, so they spend on restaurants, more cafes, things like that, not on FMCG basically. Okay, so one time it was panic buying. People are scared, as you know, that they rush to the supermarkets, they buy a lot of things. Sometimes they buy that things that do not need actually. So today they're stabilizing basically. Okay, so let me explain to you that. Okay, so to me it's very simple. In terms of social, they will go back to normal. Okay, they are human, they are social. They're not doing online much because it is not social. So social means human. Okay, so in Australia, you know that Australia already the curve is already down and they already releasing the lockdown. Yeah, during COVID, Australians use toilet papers much basically, but during COVID they ran out of the toilet paper. So will they change into new normal by using water or like Indonesians do basically? Nope. So they go back to the toilet again. Beer, the same thing. Consumption of beer, going to the beach is Australian behavior basically. During COVID, nobody go clubbing and then also go to the beach. But after COVID, I'm sure that they will go back again. Okay. In China, Jack Ma, yeah, Jack Ma. They buy a lot of offline business basically after online success. Yeah, so Jack Ma have a mall, yeah, and the biggest department store in China is called Intime. So commerce. So basically, they let the people in the store doing live streaming. So all the sales promotion girl doing selling, yeah, like home TV selling basically to the customers. So this is what it helps the Alibaba's business basically during COVID basically. Okay, so for sure offline business is still on for Indonesia. So do not hurry too much on developing online because it's just Indonesian. People love to shop. Shopping is the one of the destination of life basically, the purpose of life basically. Okay, shopping is different from buying. To me, e-commerce is buying, it's not shopping. Shopping involves experience, 5 sense of human sense basically. So we will not be having much difficulty in going back into building our consumptions in the future, whether online or offline doesn't matter, but for sure offline will be still the drivers. I have already a lot of pictures today that the people are rushing into pasar, rushing into the department store, etc., in other outside Jakarta, basically. So we'll be back. Okay, don't have to think further. Okay, so you just do your own business, basically. But digitalization will be still a long trend, basically. We need to digitalize a lot of process of the shopping. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pak Yongki. Our last question, I'll give it to our corporate member, Pak Rajan, CEO of TVS Indonesia. Silakan, Pak.
Good afternoon, Pak. My question, is clearly Masida. We know that because of the origin of the virus, is actually from China. There is an emotional backlash, and an economic backlash, from Europe and also, from US and of course from India on the Chinese products. And I heard, that some of the garment factories, in China have been impacted and they have declared layoff. Apart from that, as Mr. Bambang, mentioned, many of companies, are thinking of shifting from China. They're looking at India, and Indonesia. So, I think as again, Mr. Bambang said, in this time, the bad times, the Indonesia, they're known to make the good policies. So will government, will they come out, with an aggressive the incentive package to attract, these manufacturing companies so as to create the employment opportunities and to kickstart, the economy?
Thank you. I'll address this question directly.
Yeah.
So basically, the issue with investment in Indonesia, such as other emerging market, is ease of doing business and red tapes and stuff. And the government is currently, of course, working on reducing that. I guess we can see this issue in two streams of thinking. Yeah, the first stream is to make sure that the economy stay afloat, meaning the human, right? Because you want to save the human using the social safety net, and you want to save company. The priority, unlike the trolley case that Pak Bambang previously presented, I guess the government priority on saving the private sector is to avoid massive layoff. So basically, we know that output and growth is going to go down significantly this year, not just in Indonesia, everywhere in the world. But we want to make sure that everybody can stay afloat during this condition, so that when the pandemic is over, we are all still here and hoping to restart or jumpstart the economy again. On Monday, I had another talks with the American chambers in Indonesia, in Jakarta. The same issues was raised, whether the government would like to invite, this corporate that are relocating out of China. The simple answer to that is, of course, yes. But it's a different stream of policies, right? The policies that I present here is to make the economy stay afloat. But the second one, if you want to invite new company reallocating out of other countries, of course you need to do it one by one and quite fast. And the government is open to give incentives, of course, depending on the employment and output creation of specific sectors. But yeah, even before the COVID, this is something that the government is trying to do, right? With the trade war before, this is has been in the mind of the government. We are still thinking about identifying some of the companies that are set to reallocate out of China, including pharmacies. Now we are making lists of these companies and doing a one by one approach. If they have another needs to reallocate the industry fast to Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for tuning into our Indonesia Economic and Political Outlook 2020. Thank you for our panelists, Ibu Mashita, Pak Andri, Pak Yongki, Pak Bambang, Pak Ralph. We'll see you again at the end of the year when we have our Indonesia Economic Political Outlook 2021. Hope things are better by then. Stay healthy, stay safe. God bless us all. God bless Indonesia. Thank you.
Amin.
Thank
Thank you
you
very much.
all.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Pak.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you very much.